forefront. The most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso.
Channel Africa.
And welcome to it. If you've just joined us for this next 14 minutes, we appreciate you being with us as we wrap up Africa World Hour this Friday. Today, we look at a morning meeting that took place. It had legal minds, activists and community leaders converging in Southern African stakeholders to talk about the need for a conversation on reparatory justice. The event, hosted by the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation and the Africa Judges, as well as Jurors Forum, comes as the African Union marks 2025 as the year of justice for Africans and people of African descent. To speak about the theme, the significance of the gathering, what it means for the region, we're joined now by Nyasha Mpani, project leader at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Nyasha.
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners.
So I mentioned the AU theme for the year, and of course your gathering today to speak about reparatory justice surgery. If you could just unpack those two subject matters and also just explain a little bit more in detail about reparatory justice. What are we speaking about here?
Thank you so much. So I think the main objective of today's reparative justice surgery was to bring, as we've alluded to earlier, it was to bring together legal experts, community representatives, and advocacy groups to diagnose the systemic historical harms like colonialism. If you look at it, South Africa, we talk about issues to do with apartheid, and then also issues to do with cultural theft. And the core essence of the meeting was to co-create strategies for reparations. We called it a surgery because we feel like a surgery is something that is hands-on, and when we're trying to create a problem-solving a space for these different practitioners who were in the room. And I think this reparatory surgery, it comes at a very critical moment for Southern Africa because of the wounds of history, which are still very much fresh with us. And when we look at issues to do with the land dispossession, they are still quite topical in most Southern African countries and also other African countries. Here in South Africa, it's still an issue. It is to do with inequality, cultural erasure. They are all still topical, and some of our citizens are still reeling from the effects of these things. And with the AU then making the 2025 theme on reparations, there is now a continental political momentum, which we must say it's coming and it's also coming at a time when Belgium returned 2,000 artifacts which were looted from DRC, and also when Namibia recently commemorated for the first time the genocide which was committed against the Nama and the Herero. So this AU theme is coming at a very important time when some of these developments are happening, which are very much crucial. We're talking about issues to do with reparation and transitional justice on the continent.
I mean, you've spoken about quite a bit of them at state level, but just looking at what we certainly have been reporting on here on Africa World Hour on not just necessarily a state-led, should I say, oppression, using the levers of state power to, further oppress people, but also looking at the individuals. I mean, if we look at journalists who have been targeted, for instance, for speaking out, whether it's in Kenya, whether it's in Tanzania, whether it's in Malawi or the Democratic Republic of Congo, were there key reparations cases or advocacy efforts that you looked at that looked at individuals who exemplified the struggle that we're fighting for?
Yes, we had, for instance, here we actually had the paramount chief of the Nama and the Herero in Namibia. And it was very quite sad to listen to him as he actually shared the state of affairs in Namibia, highlighting that even though the commemorations were done for the first time in Namibia, to acknowledge the atrocities done by the Germany what was quite saddening is that there was no acknowledgement in terms of the affected communities. Those commemorations which we saw happening in Namibia, it was just the states trying to tick the box, but the affected communities were not even consulted, or they were not even part of the commemorations, and they really still feel that even though the case has been made a government priority, it has been made a government priority as a decoy to try and probably silence the communities who were affected in Namibia. So in the discussion that we're having this morning, the Paramount Chief was saying the voices of those who are affected is not being heard. It's not central in the discussions to do with reparations in Namibia. And this is a similar case when you look at across the continent, where issues to do with the reparations are of concern. You'd find that voices of the affected communities are always silent. And this is why it has taken so much time for some of these issues to be discussed, especially if we look at countries like Zimbabwe, where the issues of Bukra Wundi are yet to be discussed and addressed. And there's a lot of politicking that is going around these issues. Yet those affected communities are going through a lot because of what they went through as a result of the atrocities that are committed to them. So in as much as we are seeing governments taking these commemorations and all that, indeed the affected communities are going through a lot as they feel like they are not being, their voices are not being central to the conversations of reparations. Hence, we had such a discussion today.
As you're speaking, Nyasha, I'm actually just thinking that, community has taken a form that society has never, at least our traditionalist African society, has not even started to come to terms with. I'm thinking of situations in which there have been corrective rape, where somebody, whether they've come out or not, but they certainly have been targeted because of either their gender preference or, identity. So if you're talking legal strategies and, judicial change that is required, are we thinking broad enough about how our children, even in the next 10 years, maybe these examples of cases of reparatory justice that is needed that we have not even begun to conceive?
Several legal policy strategies were proposed to ensure that historical injustices such as colonialism and apartheid can be addressed meaningfully. And there were issues to do with strategic litigation, with an organization that is only dealing with strategic litigation cases in South Africa. And they quietly gave so many examples of the different litigation cases that they are taking up against governments and against even foreign governments against the atrocities which they committed. A case in example is the Landless People's Movement, which was also part of the conversation here. They are also taking the Germany government to a Germany court to seek to find redress over the atrocities which they committed against the Ndama and the Hereros. We also heard from the South African Human Rights Commission, who also said they are also now taking litigation cases, obviously against the issue to do with the number that was given by the TRC, where they said apartheid only affected 20,000 people. They are against that figure because they do not think that figure, 20,000, is the correct figure, and they would want to understand how the government arrived to say that apartheid only affected 20,000 people, when we can actually see with what's happening in South Africa that it's not only 20,000, a lot of people are affected by apartheid. So they are also taking those cases to court, and we're really looking forward to what the outcome is going to be for this process. So,
allow me to jump in and say, and those are very important cases that you're mentioning, but the question that I ask still remains, because if we're still talking about past injustices that need reparatory justice, I completely understand that, but there are people who still suffer from the vestiges of apartheid and colonialism today. So if we're talking about capacity building, I'm saying, are we thinking strategically in terms of capacity building and the legal frameworks that we are looking at now to prevent current justices from becoming past injustices that we'll still be dealing with, our children will be dealing with 20 years from now?
Yes, I think from the civil society sector, we are trying by all means to ensure that we are capacitating the affected communities, and we're also capacitating the current generators that even the current atrocities that are happening. We're trying to give a voice to ensure that there is redress on those atrocities. But as you know, that we are dealing with issues to do with reparations or transitional justice. We are dealing with what I can call, it's a big devil, in the sense that you're also dealing with colonial powers who also, in essence, still have control politically and economically. So trying to drive some of these cases, it can take time. That's why it has taken us this long for the AU to finally recognize that we need to put the theme of the year to focus on reparations. But be that as it may, these powerful powers who colonized us before, they still hold political and economic power. So in essence, most of the governments that we still have or who are in place in different African countries where these issues should be discussed, they are also going to what these colonial powers are demanding, or what they would have agreed on economic terms. So you'd find that for the case for Namibia, what was interesting is that the landless people were telling us that they've taken the German government to the Namibian court. But what is quite striking is that the Namibian government is also in defense of the German government. So it's a very big bull that we are dealing with, but what is needed is to eat it bit by bit till we win the case.
All right.